Good morning, everybody, to you all at this Data Week webinar on skills for data, coming to you via the Data Week live stream and on Zoom. My name is Charlotte van Ooyen, and I'm Associate Director of Digital Government and Data at the Brussels-based think tank, the Lisbon Council. Together with the International Data Corporation, the Lisbon Council is a partner in the European Data Market Study, which is bringing you today's discussion that puts the spotlight on measuring the data skills gap and what leading companies are doing to address it. Now, the data revolution is one of the most talked about trends of the last 10 years. As for every technological trend, it is subject to hypes and wild metaphors, such as data is the new oil. Well, recent historical events came back to demonstrate to us that oil is still oil, and our economies are very much dependent on it. So the challenge for policymakers is then to recognize and qualify the importance of the data economy based on evidence rather than hype. And this is precisely the goal of the European Data Market Study, which has run for almost 10 years now, to provide an evidence-based assessment of the data economy, providing new quantitative metrics and qualitative insights. As today's speakers will underline, addressing data skills and the lack of them is a key element of moving forward the data economy. The International Data Corporation has assessed that as a result of a shortage of skills, digital transformation initiatives in Europe are often delayed by about 8 months on average. And the estimate is that by 2025, the overall lack of skills will result in an annual loss of 188 billion euros for European organizations as a whole. Today, drawing on new insights from the European Data Market Study, we take a closer look at the emerging topic of data skills and the lack thereof. Now, what do we mean when we talk about data skills? And whose skills are we talking about? Surely company CEOs and policy analysts do not need to be data scientists, but they do need a certain understanding of data and proficiency in data management to make the data economy work. Do we really have a gap between the skills that are needed and that are available to make the European data economy work? And how large is this skills gap? And what will it mean for our economies? And what are companies doing to address it? Before I announce our 3 distinguished speakers who will help us get a better understanding of the issues regarding data skills and the approaches to address them, I would like to draw your attention to the opportunity that you have today to put on the table your questions on this topic. So from now on, you can post your questions and comments in the chat, whether you have joined us via Zoom or through the Data Week live stream. And please use this opportunity to ask the experts on podium today about your dilemmas with regard to data skills. Following the presentations, I may ask your question to the speakers, or if you have joined us via Zoom, I may call on you to unmute, briefly present yourself and ask your question directly. Furthermore, the webinar organization will record this session and make the recording available to you in the coming days. Today's presentations are based on 2 reports recently published by the European Data Market Study project team. The first one is entitled First Report on Facts and Figures based on the first round of measurements of the updated European Data Market Monitoring Tool. And the second one is a new data story featuring a qualitative assessment of skills for data. Highlights from these reports will be presented by 2 speakers from IDC for EU, European Government Consulting within the International Data Corporation. These are Consulting Director Giorgio Micheletti and Senior Consultant Nevena Rajko. But to kick off today's discussion, we are lucky enough to have with us one of the key persons in charge of addressing this gap in European institutions. I'm talking about Emanuele Baldacci. He is the former Director of Digital Services at the European Commission's Director General for Informatics and now serves as Director of Resources at Eurostat, where he is running a skills mapping exercise and in what we may consider the most data-intensive organization in Europe. So we're very eager today to hear more about this skills mapping exercise that you're conducting. So I'd like to give the floor to Emanuele. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Charlotte, and good morning, everyone. I also look forward to the discussion today as a learning opportunity. We are all, I would say, struggling or at least concerned about how to address in the best ways through better skills and competences the changing ecosystem in which we work. And for Eurostat, this is definitely a central mission. Eurostat is the statistical office of the European Union. Our job is to produce comparable high-quality statistics that would help decision makers, be it policy makers, citizens, businesses, to make more informed, evidence-based decisions, as Charlotte was reminding us. And to do that, we have a collaboration between the Commission, Eurostat, and the member states with collection, processing, and dissemination of statistics. Now, everything is changing in our world, and we are a piece of the changing data ecosystem. I would like to focus on 4 big changes that are driving also our quest for new competences and skills. The first is that the very ingredient that we are using to produce statistics, what we call data sources, are changing from traditional data sources, administrative data, data that we collect through surveys or censuses in the past, knocking on the door of families. We are increasingly using digital data, mobile phone data, aggregated and anonymized, credit card data, data generated by sensors or other Internet of Things devices. So digital data, to call them in a short way. And that changes everything, because not only these sources are different in terms of size, volatility, variety, but they don't come fit for use in statistics. So there is some processing that needs to be taken into account. The second element that is changing is that the engine for processing the data, the algorithms, or what the statistician would call the statistical methods, are also changing, powered by very strong AI, with machine learning becoming the key way of putting the data together to extract meaningful indicators, including for statistics. And here we share the same opportunities and challenges that other sectors are sharing for the use of AI, including avoiding black box effect, biases, and misuse of data. Particularly so because for official statistics, being a public good and an element in the decision-making processes of many different actors, we need to be able to be fully transparent about the type of processes that we subject the data to. The third element is the technology environment, and particularly the emergence of more sophisticated data platforms that are empowering more and more usage of data, but also represent a challenge for statistical organizations and government organizations at large, where some of the IT systems are still quite traditional. So how do you move from traditional IT machinery to cloud native, secure data platforms, which are definitely more powerful, but also different from the traditional factory, I would say, for the production of data. And then a fourth very important dimension is that also on the consumer side, those that are using our statistical information, things are changing, both in terms of expectations, behaviors. We have digital native users of data, but also in terms of the channels through which the data are consumed and used or reused. Nobody will in these days probably look at the traditional books that we call the statistical yearbooks and consult millions and millions of data on pages where you are representing them in tables. Everybody's looking for dynamic, interactive, digital presentations of data powered by API, possibly using machine-to-machine modalities for reusing and visualizing data, building stories, extracting intelligence. So all in all, we need to move from the statistics of the past to what we call call smart statistics. But the key message that I wanted to pass today is that in order to have smart statistics, you need to have smart skills and smart competences in your organizations. And just having the data and the algorithms in place, the platforms, is not enough. In fact, even more so now than in the past, you need to have good people and good skills in your organization, because the quality of the production of statistical information is very much dependent by the quality of the algorithms and the quality of the data treatment, not so much just on putting more volume of data in the process. And you are probably aware with the derogative expression garbage in, garbage out effect. That's exactly applying also to statistics. It's not that by throwing more data in the system and processing them blindly, you will get better information. It's quite the opposite. So what we did in Eurostat was to reflect about our competences and also the competences in the statistical system in Europe at large, so including the member states' statistical offices. And we see 5 broad gaps that are emerging where we would like to, and we would need to address the need for specific competences. The first, I would call it end-to-end data management. And I explained before that our data sources, the sources that are used to generate statistical information, are changing. And also the logic of these sources is changing. We are not anymore as statisticians in charge of designing the data collection part. We are getting what we get out of sensors data, mobile phone data, internet data. And we need to make sure that what we get is fit for purpose, also on the basis of conceptual and mathematical theories for the production and generation of statistical information. That requires new competences that are very much embedded in the data science title. So competences at the edge between technology and statistical competences. The second focus is that we will more and more have to extract signal out of noise, because the quantity and variety of data will be more than in the past. We see that already happening, which means that the way we design our algorithms and the way our people will work with data will increasingly require data analytics competences, and a variety of data analytics competences, which again, for statistics mean also making sure that you have good quality, so that you can measure how your models, your algorithms are treating the data, and that you are not making mistakes, that you're able to control any potential bias. So competences in this area, which were always part of our portfolio, will become, I would say, the large majority and the, let's say, priority competence that we would need. And then there will be new roles, and this is, let's say, dimension number 3, that were not there before. Someone calls this new role the role of a data steward. You can define the role of a data steward as someone who is in any organization, public or private company, responsible for data valorization. So making sure that the data assets that you are treating are generating the best possible values for your stakeholders. In a statistical organization, this is obviously, again, users-oriented. So how can we maximize the usage and of data and harness the power of data so that we can extract information that is also timely and fit for purpose. And then quickly, the other 2 aspects, I hinted at that already, trust and ethics. We need to explain what we do, and ethical aspects related to the use of algorithms are becoming increasingly important, including, and I would say, mostly for scientific sectors and sectors like statistics. And finally, Charlotte mentioned who is affected by skill gaps. Well, we believe that digital leadership, so the top of the organization, is also an area where we would need to continue to invest to develop our capabilities to be able to really use technologies to generate the value that we need. So in short, what we did was to work on the skill gaps that I have just explained, and try to highlight in a more granular way where these gaps are going to emerge, where, let's say, we have particular significant needs. And we developed a skill catalog that we will be using increasingly to, let's say, inform our recruitment process, but also our learning and development process. and the partnerships that we are having with sectors that are collaborating with us, particularly startups, but also research organizations, universities. And if I can just mention 4 elements as an initial conclusion from my experience in this exercise, what we learned is that, first of all, we need to focus on the bundle of skills. Just having people very specialized in one area doesn't help at all, because we will be increasingly working in a co-creation environment and in teams. So either we will have the possibility of different competences to interact very closely in teams, and for that you need the type of emotional and social intelligence, soft skills, together with the hard competences. The second aspect that I wanted to mention is that while we need to be concerned about our own skills, we also need to develop the skills of the users. In this respect, data literacy aspects, and particularly targeting so-called prosumers, producers and users at the same time of data, like media, data journalists, for example, is very important for us, because more and more it will be through this outlet that our message will be further simplified and transformed into stories that general citizens may read from. So this is also very, very important. And the final point that I wanted to mention is that it's the focus on partnerships. Increasingly, we live in a rich data ecosystem when it comes to the production of data and the production of information based on data, but also for skills. We need to rely more and more on the type of alliances that one can create. So, for example, just to give you one specific concrete example, we created a label for master programs in official statistics, which is now covering 33 universities in Europe. And through that collaboration, we are developing skills and capabilities in people that eventually can be either recruited by the statistical system or be a partner of the statistical system in public and private organizations, wherever they will end up in the labor market. So let me stop here. And as I said, I'm very much looking forward also to the presentation of the colleagues on the results of the study, which is definitely going to be an input also in our further reflections. Thanks.
Okay, many thanks, Emanuele, for this very inspiring first presentation here, giving us a good overview of the issues playing out in the public sector and mainly in the realm of statistical matters. So now let me give the floor to Giorgio Micheletti and Nevena Rajko from the International Data Corporation to present some insights from the European Data Market Study on the state of data skills across Europe and strategies to address the data skills gap. Now, first, Giorgio will give you a broad overview drawing on indicators measured through the European Data Market Monitoring Tool. And then Nevena will zoom in on a number of case studies on concrete ways in which companies foster data skills development. And afterwards, we will go to the question and answer session. So please, Giorgio, go ahead.
Thank you, Charlotte, for the introduction, and also thank you for everyone being here and the colleagues who have already spoken or will be further adding to my contribution here. Yes, correct. I'm going to say a few words, right, on the study itself and on some of the indicators that are focusing on the data skills gap, because in the end, this is what we want to tackle here today. My colleague Nevena will then provide more real-life case of what we are talking about. But first, a few slides on the study. So let me share my screen. If I see, let me say, okay. Hope you can see my slides.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So first of all, a couple of words on what the project is, the European Data Market Study is, and what the main objectives are. Charlotte, you're right. You already indicated that the study is going on for quite some time on behalf of DG Connect. So both IDC and the Lisbon Council have been working around 3 different studies. We are in the 3rd wave, and we are working around these 3 main objectives. So one is measuring the European data market indicators. So there is a quantitative element that we are facing, and it's a very important part of the study. There is an analysis element that is more on qualitative stories, let's say. So we take a specific topic and then we developed the results obtained by the indicators and comment this through real life case studies. And then we have also a mapping exercise. So in essence, we are trying to understand what the data economy is in terms of companies out there, and we visualize the results that we obtained in this study. All of this to provide policy insights on the European data economy, in particular in this case for DG Connect. In terms of the first of these objectives, so the quantitative exercise, what you can see here in this slide is a bit complicated. It's talking about methodology, it's talking about taxonomy, and of course, data collection methodologies, etc. But I'm not going through this. What I'd like to point your attention to is on the 6 macro indicators that you see in the center of this slide, in these 6 boxes. So there are a few main areas. If we look at, let's say, the core, the center right hand side of this slide, we have the data market and the data economy. So this is where all starts from. We're measuring the market, the size of the market that is based on data-based products and services, and we're measuring the effect of this market on the overall economy. So this is indicator 5 and 4. Then there is an element of data companies. So more on the left-hand side, you see we are trying to measure how many companies are actually considered data suppliers and data users. This is important because without these numbers, it's obviously not possible to measure the data market and then the data economy. And then finally, there is a third element, which is the one that interests us today, which is the data professionals one. So on the left and right hand side of the sorry about that. So the data professionals and the data skills gap. We have measured how many employees out there, how many professionals can really qualify as data professionals. I will give an overview of the definition a bit further on. And what is this? The gap that is still existing in Europe in terms of data skills. So we have the professionals, but clearly we need more of them. This is the in a very concise form, if you want, is the balance model of the demand and supply of data skills. Essentially, you can see on your right hand side we have the data professionals supply. This is essentially done by the number of data professionals that we have already apprehended in our model that are out there and that are employed, plus those that respond to these characteristics and are defined as data professionals, but are still unemployed. So there is always an element of unemployment in this respect, as the market will never be clearly completely in balance. So on the right-hand side, you have the data professional supplies, and on the left-hand side, you have the data professional demand. So where is this demand coming from? This is coming from the data companies, as I said before, so another part of our indicators. And if clearly the demand of the data professionals is exceeding the supply of data professionals, we have a gap. The other way around, which is still possible, is obviously to have an element of unemployment of data professionals if the supply exceeds the demand. But as you can well imagine, this is not the case. It's not the case in Europe, but it's not the case also elsewhere. Hence, we have a gap, we have a data skills gap. And if we go through the indicators, I mean, this is just the total, let's say, numbers for the total EU 27, showing you the difference between demand and supply in data professionals, hence the data skills gap in 2020 and in 2030, according to 3 different scenarios. One of the key characteristics of our European data market study is to have produced and to produce data not only for the present, let's say, but also in the next coming years, and according to 3 different scenarios. I'm not going to the difference between the scenarios, but you can clearly imagine, based on these names, that there is a baseline. So as things should go scenario, then there is a challenge scenario where things are not going according to plan, and a high growth scenarios where things are going particularly well, both in terms of macroeconomics assumptions, for example, but also in terms of policy implementations. So, and you can see that the gap, meaning the difference between the demand and the supply of data professionals, with a demand that is exceeding the supply, is actually getting bigger in 2030 with respect to 2020, especially if things are going well. So especially if the high growth scenarios materializes. Now, this is not counterintuitive. It's simply because clearly if the data economy and the data market are going to be particularly strong, if the macroeconomic conditions who should sustain the data market and the data economy are good, if policies implemented to sustain the data market and the data policy and the data economy are implemented correctly, then clearly this accelerations produce a higher demand of data professionals, which is not met by the supply. We could go on with other data. I mean, I think this is just an example of a short, let's say, snapshot by some of the member states. Results are not super different. So there is Poland that is a bit maybe an outlier with respect to the other data that we have collected and elaborated. But you can see that all in all, there is an almost constant data skills gap of around 5% in terms of demand that is not met by the current skills available on the market in Europe. Now, what to do with this 5%? It doesn't seem perhaps very high, but it is. It has a cost. It has business consequences, which my colleague Nevena will now explain. And precisely, I'll give now Nevena the floor to explain some of the examples of how companies are facing and are tackling this this challenge. So I think, Nevena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giorgio. You can hear me well, right?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for passing me the floor, and welcome to everyone who joined this webinar. So basically, I will be speaking about the story that we have conducted as part of the European data market study itself. So this was focusing specifically on skills for data, and it was the result of the research that we have done on the great divide between the data skills and the data workforce in the EU. In the study itself, we present through 5 case studies, each of which are presenting different perspectives, different sectoral examples on how to develop data professionals. The methodology itself, it was based on the desk research. As I mentioned, we conducted several interviews with leaders of these companies and asked them the specific questions to understand what they are doing to tackle the challenge of the data skills gap. So just giving a bit of story around what we are facing today, and also the previous speakers before me mentioned some of those elements. However, I think it's important to understand where it started. So we know very well that in the past, most of the time when companies embarked on any kind of technology related projects, most of the time the training itself wasn't part of their plan, wasn't part of the budget itself. And when it comes to trainings of their employees, we know that those were the elements that were not the highest priority, especially after the crisis in 2008 and 2009. That's where everyone cut their budgets. So we didn't have really skilling and upskilling trainings for employees. However, with the speed of the digital transformation, the lack of people with necessary skills has become a huge issue all over the world, and of course also in Europe. And the fact that currently there are not enough people with relevant skills have a direct impact on companies. So here we can talk about the revenue growth that is not happening, or the time to create new products is in a delay, or just to answer some of the customer needs that are currently on the market itself. I think Charlotte already mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, but I just want to reiterate because I think it's a very interesting finding that IDC found during the time that we have conducted the study, is that we estimate that by 2025, the overall lack of skills will result in an annual loss of 188 billion euros for Europe and its organizations. So I think that's something that we can keep in our heads and think about it, that we need really to take some steps to tackle the challenge itself. Then what's the solution? I think I should also put there a question mark if there is a real solution to this. So what we know that in response to the digital skills gap, many companies already started to take some steps, to do some trainings, to try to implement different kind of programs, also to have data management transportation programs, only looking at the company itself. However, what we can see and what we know obviously from the digital transformation standpoint is that most of the time this is always centered around, how we can better use data, how we can understand the data better, or how we can use data to have a better customer outcome. So here we can speak about the customer behavior, or just overall on how to have new products and have new services. So given this situation, what we can see that currently there are also new emerging data professional roles that are coming on the market. So we are not talking only about data scientists when we are checking, which are the expected needs from companies, and most of the time obviously from the private sector, but we heard also from Emanuele that is also a relevant aspect from the public sector itself. So what we can see when it comes to the job descriptions, that the person doesn't really need to be a data scientist, but there is some specific skills requirement when it comes to understand how to use data, how to analyze it, how to implement it, how to create dashboards, how to look at those huge amounts of data and have some sort of conclusions. So that's something that we can see with the roles such as data analyst, or just a simple business analyst who should have those skills already to use the data itself. Okay, sorry, I was interrupted for a second. And then just moving on to the next slide, I would like to show some real life examples that we had in the study itself. So I don't know, Giorgio, if you can move to the next one. Okay. So as I mentioned, the companies have already embarked on this journey. So these are the 5 examples that we selected and that we are analyzing more in detail in the study itself. I'm not going to go into specific details. However, let's start with EY. I think all of you know very well Ernst Young. They are a huge multinational company, and they already started their digital transformation many years ago. However, the key step that they they took and they set up as a goal is not to create specific data scientists in their company, but to create that sort of digital mindset and also have data core element in their way of thinking in the daily business that they are doing. So the business as usual is not something that that they want to continue, and to have the digital aspect included itself. So as a first step, they have set up a specific digital academy, which is offering a learning path for their employees by domain and by sector. So I think it's a very important element to highlight that it's not a generic kind of training for all of their employees, but it's really targeted to different departments of the company itself, because obviously different parts needs to use data in a different way. And then just moving on very quickly, there is a mid-sized data consulting and training company in the Netherlands. So their goal is to coach young professionals to become data scientists or data analysts. And they created a 15 weeks training program that is available for the applicants. And following those 15 weeks, they ensure employment for 2 years. So here is a direct connection between the private sector, where you create really those people with the necessary skills that is demanded by the companies themselves. And I think it's an interesting example due to the fact that after the 2 years are passing, the company is not letting the hands of those people that participated to the training itself. They create some sort of career path for them, and also try to coach them on how to move on and how to try to arrive to a next level. More or less, when it comes to selecting people participating in the program, they are not only focusing or targeting students that are coming from the STEM typical background, but they are also looking at soft skills. So that's something that is particularly important when people are also dealing with data and digital skills. And maybe another example quickly, which is the European Data Science Academy. It was a project that was funded by the European Commission, by the Horizon 2020 program. It ran for 3 years. And that program had a specific objective to create a curriculum for students and also for the professors to understand how to build their courses that are relevant for the market. And in this case, what our study found is that even though those professors, they were coming from 6 different European countries, were trying to create some sort of best practices, the curriculum itself. However, one of the biggest challenges that they were facing was the pace of the development of the technology itself. So sometimes they found, some of the courses that they have worked on or the career path itself that became obsolete due to the changing pace of the technology. And now for a conclusion, I will just move very fast on our key findings and policy implications that we had in the study. So just moving on to the next slide, please. So here you can see our key policy implications. I'm not sure if I have time to go into details. So these are the 6 findings that we found after conducting our study. So obviously, what was a common denominator for all the examples that we had was the investment in data skills. So each company had a business benefit after investing in training programs or just doing something internally and upskilling or when they reskilled their own employees. I think that's something that is an important element. Obviously, we can see also from the European Commission side that there are many steps taken towards these efforts, when it comes to different kind of funding programs, but also the strategies. So here we can speak also about the skills agenda that the Commission published, or just simply the digital path that has set up the goal to have more than 20 million ICT specialists in Europe. So we can see that the policymakers are also reacting, and we can also see that from the private side, there are steps taken. I think Emanuele mentioned a very interesting element when it comes to digital mindset and how top leaders need to be aware of technology. So here we have a common point to highlight, because indeed also in the studies, in the case studies, we could see that building a digital mindset is a high priority also for the private companies, and especially to explain, you know, what are the consequences of using digital technology. So here we can speak about societal and ethical aspects of technology. Then, of course, to use to encourage and boost public and private collaboration. So here, obviously, when let's say when a university is working together with companies and create specific programs can help to close the digital gap. And then, as a closing point, I will just mention, of course, to retain talent in Europe. Maybe that's a point that didn't really come up today, but I think that's something that has been a long-standing dilemma in Europe itself, because we can look at US or we can look at China, that most of the time our talents are deciding to leave and to take some better opportunities abroad. So that's something that that we see as an important element where policymakers together with the private sector should work together to understand how to create better conditions to keep those people in Europe. So I think I will stop here, and also to give some time for the questions.
So thank you very much, Nevena. Let's indeed move to some of the questions that came in through the live stream just now. So we have a first question from Mr. Brendan Rowan, who asked, which is directed at Emanuele Baldacci. How will Eurostat address the definition of the ICT specialist, which well, is a pre-2010 reality, versus digital experts, which is more of the post-2020 view, which allows for more stratification? So is it at all possible?
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for the question. It's very relevant because obviously we need to measure well what we want to change. So indeed, this is a constant effort, I would say, in all sectors that we are measuring in statistics to update the definition so that they become, that they stay relevant. And this activity ranges from all sectors and domains. So if you think about prices, for example, this is what normally is done with the calculation of inflation. You don't, let's say, put in the basket for inflation prices of goods that are not consumed to a large extent anymore today. The same goes for the definition of occupations. The reference international classification that is used for the production of statistics is managed by the ILO, the International Labour Organization, and it's called the International Standard Classification of Occupations. This is a mapping of jobs based on tasks and duties. So it's very refined, let's say, and it allows also to constantly update the content of the classification and the content of a job, depending on the changing nature of the task and the duties. So for example, in the ESCO classification, you can find a definition of what is a data analyst and a specific definition, also specific occupation of data scientist. There are also other data-related jobs that are defined in the classification. And as I say, the classification is a living document. Obviously, you don't change it every moment, but at regular intervals, there's a review to check whether the professions that are defined and standardized in terms of the definitions are the correct ones or not. So when measuring then on the basis of this standard definition, the education content, for example, of a training program, or whether individuals report or have skills and competences, this new definition or updated definition is reflected in the number. So eventually statistics are, let's say, the result of this process of updating the definition. But specifically on the question, yes, this is already in part the case with some very specific definitions of jobs related to activities that contain data. But again, in 3, 4, 5 years, we may have a different definition because the tasks and the duties for these jobs may change and new occupations may change. For example, in some organizations now, you may have a data steward or chief data officer. And these are new functions that are emerging and appearing from nowhere, or at least the transformation of existing functions. Thanks.
Thank you, Emanuele. Let me quickly go to Nevena, because I'm curious to hear from the experiences you gathered through the case studies you did, whether you recognize this image and what have you seen in the 5 organizations that you researched? Have they made this adaptation from the old ICT specialist nomenclature to the move to digital experts? Because we can talk about new digital skills, but organizational structures and definitions and concepts have to adapt as well, obviously.
Yes, indeed. I think that was something that we could see throughout all the examples. And as I was saying earlier, when it comes to the big companies, you know, those multinational companies, that they don't look anymore only on those specific, you know, developing data scientists or having someone who has those high skills to be able, let's say, to code. However, what was an important element through all of those examples is that we have to create that basic knowledge to have digital literacy itself, because how can a company evolve or come up with better ideas or have, you know, new products or just to have better business outcomes if their employees doesn't understand how to use the digital technologies themselves? So EY especially, that's why they said, okay, we don't really want to have only specific people, because that's something that we can focus on and look at those in a specific way. However, their overall goal was to have an impact throughout the company and to reach all the employees that they have.
Okay, thank you, Nevena. And I see in the chat from Giorgio that also from the perspective of the European data market study, there's been an important development here. Yes, so could you comment a bit?
Yeah, exactly. No, very briefly, exactly. So what Emanuele has highlighted at the very beginning of this event, right? So the 4 big changes and also the new dimensions that he has explained, they have been apprehended in the data market study, and this is clear from the fact that we started, as you said, Charlotte, almost 10 years ago, and we started with a definition that was definitely more restricted, and we did use the Eurostat definitions, but the more we went into the exercise, we certainly had to extend this definition to assume different codes. And to put it bluntly, obviously I do not recall the exact codes, etc., and the definitions, but essentially we moved from a definition of data professional that was mainly a technical guy, a sort of I wouldn't say, well, allow me, the geek or the engineer guy, but to someone who had not just to store and manipulate data, but also to be able to interpret it, to work with this data, to have a business acumen and a business an element of an analysis of this data. So I think that without knowing in a sense, but the definition that we have applied in the data market, and especially in the last version, in a sense, recalls and follows the path that has been described in the beginning by Emanuele Baldacci. So yes, this is something that we have followed as well. Thank you.
Yes, so following up on that, we also have a question from Mr. Hassan Mahmoud through the live stream, who says data roles are diverse. is it known how the gap varies depending on the type of skills? So do we have a broader gap, for example, when it comes to data analysts, or is it more data scientists which are in demand, or does the problem lie more with machine learning engineers which we need, or is it an even development across this 5% gap, which seems to be quite constant?
Yeah, unfortunately, we do not have this detail. We have not, our model does not capture this level of granularity, so we are not in a position to tell you which under category, let's say, of data professional is more in need, and which one is more covered. There are different elements to be considered here. I think that the more we go into the more we look into the upcoming years, right? So if we look at 2030, as in the case of the last data market study, the one that we are currently conducting, I think we'll also be tapping into a pool of professionals that is more and more digital native, and therefore there are elements that probably will be somehow covered. You, however, I think highlighted Charlotte characteristics that is very much relevant. So, for example, machine learning, artificial intelligence, this is something that we are in need of. So certainly we need this type of skills. But again, you won't find, unfortunately, and this is a good inspiration for future development, you won't find a granular exercise, so a cut into the different categories. So I'm not in a position to answer this directly.
Yes, perhaps Nevena, from the more qualitative side, have you seen specific focus among the organizations that you researched of the type of skills that they wish to develop or encourage?
Yes, indeed, they were not only focusing on data scientists. So obviously, when it comes to businesses, there are, as we know, we don't have enough people on the market currently that could respond to all the demand. So that's why in these past years, there is this emerging new roles that we can see. So when it comes, to have data analysts or those business analysts that have some sort of basic skills to deal with data and also to create something, however, not arriving at that high level of telling themselves that they are data scientists themselves. So that's something I think that the companies understood and recognize, that there are some skills that an already employed person can do. That's when we speak about upskilling or reskilling, and that's how in different sections of companies they could use these skills to have some business outcomes.
Okay, thank you, Nevena. I'd like to quickly go back to Emanuele Baldacci, because you mentioned that from the Eurostat side, a skills catalog has been developed, which will inform recruitment, but also the learning and development process within the organization. So I'm wondering, does this also take into account strategies to attract the talent? Because you've been able to identify where the skills gaps are, which are clearly not only technical, but also a great deal of soft skills. But what do you do also to compete with the private sector? Because there is a gap and there is a demand, and the best will get the talent on board. So yes, what is your view on that?
Yeah. Well, that's a very important point you mentioned, particularly, let's say, as we are as an organization based in Luxembourg, which is a very vibrant digital labor market, digitally oriented labor market. We are also competing a lot with public and private institutions to attract and retain talent. I guess I would say we do two types of things. First, there's a general aspect of working for the public sector, which it's clearly coming with a package of motivation and values. And so the purpose for which you are, let's say, using your skills in the data domain, particularly when it comes to statistics, is in itself a mission, if I can use this term, and has a public purpose. So we definitely have a strong element of talent attraction as on the basis of that, and we recruit people who have been studying in this domain because they really wanted to see, let's say, how data can help make better decisions. At the same time, I believe there's also an aspect of how your organization is internally shaped and type of culture and values that are defining your organization. I will give you an example because I made in my career in different places various attempts to build up data science teams, for example. And that didn't always, let's say, succeed. Because, for example, if you really want to create a team that is innovative, not creative, and that, let's say, basis and has a foundation in data exploration, and you put this team in a very hierarchical setup where the decision making comes from the top, where the results are in a way driven by the strategic goals, and where there is very little room for failure in any innovation project, well, you would probably achieve the double negative effect of frustrating the team and damaging the organization. So I believe that on the one hand, the organization should nurture this type of talent, including a more innovative and exploratory culture. So sometimes you let the data speak before you make a prediction about what the data should tell you. And that's the best way to go. And secondly, you also need, however, to clarify well, what do you expect from data scientist professionals in an organization like statistics? For example, in our organizations, we are not there to do research for the sake of research. We don't want to have the most, let's say, innovative academic method on the market. What we want to have is a solid, trusted way of producing information, statistical information using in the best way data. So again, setting also the stage and clarifying what the mandate is very important. But I would say on both sides. So the organizational and governance and cultural incentive setup is very important.
Thanks so much. I see that we're already approaching the closing time of this webinar, unfortunately. So I will go to Giorgio for some final takeaways for the audience regarding the data skills gap. You're still, yes.
Yeah, sorry. No, I think we've been through a quite interesting journey, although very, very short. There are a few messages that are emerging. I would say one is that certainly the data environment in terms of professional characteristics that it has to entail has been changing fast and deeply, and with all the consequences that Emanuele and a data professional organization like Eurostat has faced and has highlighted. We have highlighted the fact that there is, alas, a data skills gap. It's there. It's probably there to stay for a while, and we've also seen that an actual improvement of certain macroeconomic and also policy elements in the years to come will not do much per se to close this gap or to reduce this gap. So the third element that we have highlighted is that there is intervention in this case, both from a policy and public policy perspective. Nevena has highlighted some of the most important initiatives taken, for example, by the European Commission, but there are also other national level initiatives. And there are companies, so the private sector, that is already tackling the issue directly with different levels and extent of success, if you want. But they are aware of the issue. They are aware of the business costs that this has, and there are different programs already in place. Will this be enough? Probably not. We need to continue monitor I would say the issue, and possibly have more granular data, as we have heard today, also from our questions. So more fun to come on this,
Yes.
on this topic.
Indeed, the European Data Market Study will keep a close eye on developments, and I think today's discussion has showed how essential it is to get this broader overview and at the same time really zoom in on what is happening inside the organizations. One of the things that Nevena mentioned is the business benefit, really demonstrating the business benefit of investing in data skills. That's something essential also for the public sector in terms of developing a value case to invest in these matters. So, well, I think we've come to the end of today's session. Unfortunately, I would love to talk some more with all of you. Thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you to everyone in the audience, both in today. Keep an eye on the new developments regarding the European data market study. The links to the reports have been posted in the chat if you want to learn more. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you again at the next event. Have a very nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess that for them, all times we talk about IDC,